Good evening. Welcome to the March 8th meeting of the Lower Mukhenjee Township Planning Commission. The meeting is now called to order. There are two changes on tonight's agenda. Agenda item 6, Seoka Subaru. That item has been removed from the agenda. Also, agenda item 8, 900 South Hillview Road sketch plan. That item has also been removed from the agenda. So those two agenda items will not be discussed at tonight's meeting. First agenda item is approval of the minutes. All the Planning Commission members should have received copies of the minutes from our regular meeting of December 14th and regular meeting of February 8th. Are there any changes or corrections to the minutes? All right, we'll take both minutes together. So is there a motion to approve both the December 14th regular meeting minutes and the February 8th regular meeting minutes? Is there a motion? We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Any further comment? All in favor of approving the meeting minutes as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion passes by a vote of 6-0. The next item on the agenda is Trexler Town Act 537 Plan Update. I believe there are representatives from Lehigh County Authority with us tonight. If you would like to come up front to the table at the front of the meeting room. And if you would just introduce yourselves for the record.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Well, just pull it a little bit closer. You got to pull it real close.
How's this better?
That's good.
Oh, good. Thank you for Nate for inviting me here today to talk about the Trexler Town Act 537 special study. My name is Phil DePoe from LCA. I'm the senior planning engineer. And with us in the audience is our CEO, Lisa Gross. So why are we here? As you know, or as you may not know, the region is under Act 537 planning. It's a mandate by DEP. And last year we submitted an interim 537 plan, which was approved by DEP. And as part of that interim plan, we had to put in the Trexler Town area, and we had to address it over these next 4 years. So when we submitted that plan, we didn't know exactly what the solution was. Since we've submitted the plan, since we've had approval, we have identified a solution. And the study that I dropped off to Nate last Monday is that study. So it's a special Act 537 study that is required by DEP to address the Trexler Town area problem. And Nate, if you can point for me, I want to start at the top of the system. It's hard to see, but the Lca Pre-Treatment Plant, Nate, if you can zoom in a little bit. So the pre-treatment plant sits in Upper Mcconju. And then Nate, as you keep on going down with your pointer, the Western Lehigh Interceptor, keep on going south. It keeps so that area in blue is the bottleneck. And it's been an issue for some time now. And again, this study is going to address that particular issue. I do want to point out the boundaries. So you can see, Nate, that diagonal line, between Upper and Lower Mukhenjee. So the problem splits both townships. But what the problem is that the pipe was laid too flat back in the 70s. So there are dry day and wet day problems in that particular area. And the problem with this area is that, of course, we're at the top of the system. So if you fix this system, if you fix this part, we're just going to be pushing it further downstream. So we were in a predicament. And what we landed on was actually a suggestion from Upper Mukhenjee. So Nate, if you can point your cursor to the Upper Mukhenjee trunk line, it's hard to see, it's that orange line. So that is in a Upper Mukhenjee, they call it the trunk line, but in essence, it's an interceptor. And that, of course, collects Upper Mukhenjee's some of their waste, and actually Lower Mukhenjee ties in a handful of times to that trunk line as well. And that trunk line, follows Mill Creek Road all the way down past the Walmart, and then it ties into just upstream of our Spring Creek pump station. So what the proposed solution is to construct a pump station at the pretreatment plant and run a what's called a force main over to the Upper Mukhenjee trunk line. And what this will do is it will free up some capacity in the blue area and put it in the orange line. So that orange line is, thankfully, it's oversized, so there is capacity for us. And so we're not going to divert all the flow. It's just going to be a portion of the flow. So it's going to be controlled by the level in the Upper Mukhenjee system. So that's how the pump station will be controlled. We also did look at two other options. One of them, again, was to, in that blue area, Nate, was to parallel that area. But like I mentioned earlier, if we parallel it, it's just going to push the problem further downstream. So that was much more expensive and much more, it would take much more time to construct that. Another option was to do an underground storage pipe in that same area. That didn't work as well. We have a sophisticated sewer model, and the underground storage, it did not work for the same reason. It would fill up and then we couldn't drain it. So of those three options, the pump station was selected, and the cost estimate is roughly $6 million compared to a cost estimate of $30 million for the two others. So this is substantially cheaper. It will be constructed much quicker. We're talking hopefully a submission to DEP by June, and then we can have this out to bid next May, and construction will wrap up in early 2025. So that's the high-level look at this special study that was given to Upper Mukhenjee, Lower Mukhenjee, and of course the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission. So that's all DEP is requiring, just Upper and Lower Mukhenjee to eventually pass a resolution. So what your role is with Act 537 planning, the planning commissions have 60 days to comment if they want. If not, it will just go in for the record as no comment. So after the 60 days is over, which will be the beginning of May, we have to advertise for 30 days to the public. And after the public advertisement's over, we can get it on the agenda for the commissioners. So what I need eventually for DEP is two resolutions, one from Upper, one from Lower Mukhenjee. And again, this is a DEP mandated project. So that's the short term. It is an interim solution because as I've hinted at, the whole region's under Act 537 planning, and that long-term plan is due March of 2025. So the long-term solution will be identified and selected by that date. So this will satisfy DEP's short-term requirements, and again, the long-term solution will be addressed in a few years. Lisa, do you want anything to add? Nate, do you have anything to add? I'll be happy to entertain questions.
Are there any questions from the planning commission? Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you for explaining. You said there were three options. Third option, which is $6 million. Can you just take us through that again?
Yes.
What are the exact three options?
Yes, so the first option is the selected option, which is the pump station, the force main. And we do have the majority of the easements already. There was a project like 12 years ago in similar vein that was never constructed. And so we acquired easements about 12 years ago. So that the selected alternative is roughly 6 million. The second alternative was the parallel option, Nate, in the blue area where the problem is.
The orange line.
Right where Nate's cursor is. So that's the problem area. And one of the alternatives was to parallel that. So basically you put another pipe in a parallel fashion. The construction of that would not be easy. We would have to acquire easements. The cost was roughly 30 million because we can't just stop in the problem area. Because once we stop at, it's hard to see, but we see manhole L300, we would just push the problem to that area. So we'd have to continue paralleling all the way until we get to the Spring Creek pump station. So that alone would be 30 million to parallel from the top of the problem area all the way to Spring Creek. So we can't do that again, because if we would just push the problem further downstream, which we can't do. So then the third option would be to put a large 6-foot diameter pipe underground in that problem area. So it would be like a hybrid storage tank / parallel option. But the problem with that is during rain events, the storage pipe would never drain because because of the downstream issues. So those were the three main options. And again, we can't do the second one or the third one because of the downstream issues, and it's much more expensive. So again, this is not the long-term solution that will be identified in a couple of years, but this satisfies DEP and it will solve this problem. That's been a problem for quite some time now.
So is it safe to say that you're basically pumping around and bypassing the problem area?
Yes, we're moving the flow from one area to another area that has capacity.
The idea of a long-term
Yes, this has been an ongoing process that started and stopped by DEP. And now it's started again with a finish date. So the solution has been, one solution has been identified, 7 years ago, which is to start at Klein's Island. And you have to work your way all the way up here. So yes. That's one potential solution.
who would bear those costs?
TBD. So the problem is, you have to start at the bottom and work your way up. And this is not the only problem area. It's problematic here, all the way down. So the interceptor was laid in the mid-70s.
It looks like all the improvements as part of the project you just described are all in Upper Mukhenjee. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes. And the Upper Mukhenjee trunk line happens just to flow through Lower Mukhenjee. But DEP did want Lower Mukhenjee involved, since it's.
You're basically reallocating capacity, and some of that capacity is in Lower Mukhenjee Township.
Could you say it again?
I said you're reallocating some capacity in the lines.
Yes.
And some of that capacity is in Lower Mukhenjee Township.
Yes, this happens where the trunk line is physically located, yes. But the actual construction is all in Upper Mukhenjee, north of 222.
And the $6 million cost, that will all be on Lehigh County Authority. You're not asking the municipalities to.
It gets spread out amongst all the Western Lehigh group. So there's 7 of us in the Western Lehigh group.
One more question. The problem area, as you described, that will still stay in service. It's just you're diverting some of that flow to the proposed trunk line, correct? So the area that's
Yes,
highlighted blue will still remain in service. It's just, it won't see as much flow.
correct. Yes. Not to get too far in the weeds, but we're basically going to divert half the flow into Upper Mukhenjee's trunk line. And it's all going to, again, be controlled by actual levels in the Upper Mukhenjee pipe.
And you've already approached to the Upper Mcconju Township with this.
Yes, they're on board.
For my edification, you said that the cost was divided between 7, what,
Yeah, the Western Lehigh group, it's made of 7 municipalities, right? So it's upper,
we bear some portion of that.
yes. Yeah, so this is the first step to get DEP approval. Then we have to submit what's called a Part 2 permit. But you can't submit the Part 2 permit until 537 approval. So again, no specific response is needed if none is deemed necessary by the commission.
If we do, the 2 townships respond quickly, would that speed the process up?
It would. Unfortunately, Upper Mukhenjee's planning commission doesn't meet till mid-April. So we're kind of stuck with that. But yeah, the sooner the better.
What action are you looking for the planning commission to take?
No real action. If there's any comments,
Just submit comments.
submit comments if you have any, and they will be addressed in the final submission.
All right. Any comment or questions from the public? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very fine presentation.
Thank you.
All right. Next item on the agenda is the sketch plan for 3510 Mcconaughey Road.
Mr. Chair, while they're getting ready, I think one thing I'd like to bring up, I see some attendees on here, I believe, who did register, who might be on for that Hillview. So I would just like to, for people who are watching from home right now, the Hillview project, 900 South Hillview Road, which was previously the site of Mukhenjee Manor with the sketch that came in. Again, that's not going to be discussed this evening. So if you're listening in, you can log off and we'll let you know. There'll be another agenda at a future date when we expect they'll be before the planning commission again.
Thank you, Nate. So next item is 3510 Mcconaughey Road. Nate, if you want to review the planning issues.
Be happy to, as the plan comes up here, and I'll start the share screen for it. The applicants did go to the zoning hearing board and obtain relief for this plan. Following previous discussions with respect to townhomes on the site, the zoning hearing board did not grant the relief that the applicant was seeking at the time. So what you have in front of you here is a sketch plan based off of the relief that was obtained by the applicant. And it includes a loop road, and please excuse me as I try and get the share screen. Okay, it's working. It includes 22 single-family residences on a private loop road here that'll come out on the Mukhenjee Road. You see a passive open space area here immediately to the north. It's roughly 32,000 square feet. And then you'll see a larger area here over to the south that includes passive open recreation space or passive open space as well. Pretty large, 162,000 square feet, give or take, and an expanded stormwater basin from our current stormwater basin in the park that would handle the runoff. My presumption is also, and I'll let the applicant speak to it, but this would probably also be for water quality under the MPDES. This would probably also be water quality area. I should note that as with the original plans that were presented to the township, you have walking trail along Mcconaughey Road within the neighborhood. and then a dogleg trail that runs out here through the passive open space area that'll head into the park. So you have connectivity to the park, which is a great asset for the community. One thing or two things of planning concern that we do just want to make sure get handled should this move forward. Obviously, we do need the reverse frontage buffer treatment in some way, shape, or form. However that ends up being, we can work with the applicant. It doesn't obviously have enough room to be our big regular one, but we can figure something out. And two, something brought up by our zoning officer that we also just want to make sure of. As you can see, the backyards here are rather small. So we just want to make sure that through impervious calculations and further discussion, there is just enough room in there for on-site improvements in the way of patios and sheds and whatnot, because they'll be coming to our zoning officer once they move in looking for those improvements. So with that, we will need to think about stormwater easements and utility easements on the site. This would be a plan that would be subject to our new saldo ordinance updates that we made several months ago, actually a little bit over a year ago now. So I think it's important to note that those would be subject to here. So if we can't handle those, there would be some waiver requests, but this is what we're looking at this point. And this is based off of a lot of public feedback and trips to the zoning hearing board. That's all I have. Hand everything else off to Brian.
All right, thank you, Nate. So this plan is much better than some of the previous plans, like the fourth or fifth time you guys have been here. There are certainly some concerns. You guys obviously have received the several zoning variances. We will note that there are some issues with the intersection separation from Lower Mcconju Road and Indian Creek Road and the nearest intersection for this community. To elaborate, as well as the centerline radius of the road, minimum is 200 feet. We'll obviously have to discuss that as well. There's a limited number of buildings within this subdivision, so there may be some discussion about a waiver request, potential waiver request for that. I'd like to elaborate a little more on what Nate had mentioned about the minimum lot area and easements. This site is relatively flat. We expect that there will need to be storm sewer inlets in the rear yards of lots 3 through 13, as well as storm sewer along Mcconaughey Road. And if there are any required storm sewer pipes that need to run between the easements, you have to make sure that that minimum lot area does not include those easements for individual lots. We just want to make sure that you guys look at that before we get the land development plan submission back. As well as grading, this is relatively flat. The rear yards, if you're maintaining that existing buffer along the rear of lots 8 through 12, it's going to be tough to grade swales in and other conveyance, above ground conveyance. So just want to make sure you guys are taking a careful look at that when you do get around to the land development plans. It's just going to be difficult. So I just want to make sure you guys are aware of that and incorporate that in.
Brian, one thing that wasn't brought up in our review letters that I actually just thought of now and it is on the fly. So please, my thoughts are just running here. But moving to a shorter frontage of the lot could also be something that could be considered, because we have talked about that in the past with other subdivisions. I think less of a front yard for more of a backyard is an even trade in this type of situation, and it would create more of the frontage that we've been trying to achieve in several of our other subdivision options in our zoning. You'd create more or less that front yard neighborhood setback, a traditional neighborhood development style, especially if they utilize front porches and whatnot. So you'd have a smaller front yard, you get more space in the back. It could be something that could be considered by the applicant moving forward. We have certainly advocated for it with other developments like the Mertztown development over the last year or two. So that could be an option that they could look at moving forward.
Applicant's attorney is with us tonight. You
Yes.
just want to state your name for the record.
Surely, Eric Schock from Fitzpatrick Lenson Buba. And Nate, can you tell me, is Reese Rosenthal able to speak?
He is actually, what I'll do is I'll promote him to a panelist.
Okay,
Just give me a
thanks.
moment here.
So the developer is with us remotely.
And what is his name again?
Reese Rosenthal.
Reese.
You've seen him here before with me, sitting next to me.
Okay, he's being promoted to a panelist.
Um,
And the screen's back up. Sorry, there was a glitch for a little while there where it wasn't up, but residents who are watching this now should be able to see the plan.
Are there any specific issues that the
Yeah,
applicant would like to bring up?
There's a few things I'll go over, and I'm going to take one out of order though, because I do have a question. So in the lot area question, when I look at the saldo, it says minimum lot area is the land area required for the creation of a lot as specified in the township zoning ordinance. And the zoning ordinance for the lot area says an area of land determined by the limits of the property lines. Any portion of a lot included in the street right of way shall not be in the lot area. So we do have some extra, the lots were larger than the minimum anyway. So I'm not necessarily saying we wouldn't be able to accommodate it anyway, but the engineer just had the question of if the saldo references the zoning definition, why it would be something different when there's no minimum lot size in the saldo.
I thought the lot area definition stated.
That's in the saldo. I mean, that's
Saldo.
the confusion he had, because he said, you look in the saldo definition and it makes you subtract certain things out. But when you look at the minimum lot area definition in the saldo, it says refer to the zoning ordinance. So his only question was, are there other reasons why we subtract those out? Because to determine whether we meet the minimum lot area, it says go to the zoning ordinance. So I just wanted to ask that question because it was the engineer saying to me, I'm not quite positive that when the easements come out, that it means our lot is not compliant for zoning. And did you see what I'm saying, Nate? Because I'm reading it from the saldo.
What
And
is
he's just trying to coordinate that.
What is the definition for lot area in saldo?
In the saldo, it does take, you are
It says
exactly right.
excludes.
That's the lot area in the saldo. But when it says minimum lot area, it says take the zoning ordinance definition. And that's what he was saying. He said, I didn't think our lots would violate the lot minimum lot area requirement for the saldo. There's no minimum lot area requirement. I mean, for the zoning, there's no stated minimum lot area under the saldo. He said, so I thought we were all right, but again, he said, look, I've got some room. Our lots are actually larger than I think 7,500, but I'll have him look at that, but he
Okay.
did want me to raise that question because he couldn't be here.
So you're saying there's basically two definitions of lot area.
Exactly.
One that doesn't allow easements to be included and one that seems to allow easements to be included as the lot area.
Yes, and that's, the first one is the saldo, the second one's zoning, except in the saldo, the minimum lot area says, see the township zoning code. So that's what he went by to make sure he was good. And he did, and part of the reason he was oversizing the lots was to accommodate what Nate had said, to make sure he made these sufficient for the bump up that so he was thinking, I'm making them larger for the purpose of ensuring that we can have the appurtenances to the home, the accessory uses that the saldo requires. And he was trying to do that. That's the reason we ended up going only really for a variance from the coverage requirements, because he could then accommodate the extra, shed, deck, et cetera. So we'll work on that. And we're not trying to be difficult about it. We'll definitely work on it, but that's the way this has to work for us to shift from the driveways in or I mean, it's one of those things where we're saying we have gone to the mat on this in terms of trying to find a way to make it work, because it's the same. And that just leads me into two of the other items, which was the radius and the separation. From the beginning, there's been a position of we really would like the loop road. Well, to do the loop road, there's no way we can do it without those two waivers. So we are going to be requesting those waivers. Because again, if somebody says, I don't want to grant the waiver for either of those, we're back to saying, well, then we got to put in these darn driveways, or we got to do the town, start doing the things that people didn't want from the beginning when they saw those plans. So again, this is a sketch plan. We're going to engineer it, but I just want to lay the foundation for the fact that on those items, we have gone round and round to try to end up with something that I think, I agree with you, Brian. This is, in the grand scheme, we'd all say this is better. This kind of, I would say we were serving about 7 or 8 masters by the time we got to this one. This one does that. So I just want to say we're gonna work as best we can with staff, Brian, et cetera. But we are gonna need some flexibility on those items, because those items are essential to what people seem to be suggesting would be the great compromise when we got to this. So.
All right, so I think you're looking for direction from the township in terms of the definition of lot area and minimum lot area, and which definition applies in your case.
Number one, and number two, what's your thought on the waivers for the radius of the roadway? And we acknowledge Brian's comment, make sure EMS is not affected. That's not an issue. We will do that on that, and the separation from Indian Creek, because again, the plan only works in this configuration with that. We didn't need those waivers with the other plan that had the driveways. So.
Yeah, I think jumping in here real quick, it would make sense that since there is such a desire to have the loop road concept, as long as there's not a life safety issue or a maintenance issue, i.e. plowing, then this, given the shape of the lot, would be something that we may want to think about, since there was so much discussion about preference towards the loop road, given this one particular situation. With respect to the definitions, I'm reading everything here on the fly as we're discussing it. I would defer, and we'll have a discussion with the township engineer, but one thing that I want to make abundantly clear is that our intent with the change of those saldo modifications was that lots overly encumbered by easements, in addition to not having the ability for appearances, is specifically the spirit and intent of the language. And we had that reviewed multiple times to make sure that it stood the legal test. So we'll talk to the solicitor about it, but we have a pretty strong comfort level that, the intent here is to make sure that someone's entire backyard doesn't consist of a stormwater easement.
Right. And we're not looking to do that either. It was just Rob saying, hey, I want to make sure, because he did try to accommodate the saldo and the fact that he wanted to make sure, he thought he designed this so that the decks and the sheds would be able to be accommodated as this was laid out. But we'll discuss that further. But I just didn't want to not, since it was in the letter, I just wanted to raise the issue of those 2 items, or 3, however you want to look at it. Those items are things we want to say, look, we need some, give and take here, but it's the only way this thing works, right?
Is there any opposition to Nate's suggestion that try moving the homes closer to the street to create more room in the back?
I'll ask Reese, but Reese, can you answer that? Is there any issue with trying to shift it and give it a bigger backyard if you could do it that way?
I don't believe that would be an issue, no.
Okay. Yep. So we're more than willing to work with everybody, but we just want to, I wanted to make my little, get up on the soapbox a little bit and say, we're trying here. And I think everybody can agree this is, for most people's purposes, better than, I don't know, the 17 iterations we tried before we got to here. So.
Make sure when you begin your formal engineering design too, there's going to have to be a spot for the bank mailboxes, because everybody in here isn't going to be able to get a mailbox anymore per the USPS. So you might want to consider that on the north end of the site, where there's the passive open space where that bank could go. And again, you can utilize front porches and not have that count towards intrusion into your yard area either. So if you want to do that and go traditional neighborhood style development, you can go pretty close and put in a front porch on all those houses.
And we did discuss that. And Reese, that was one of the things you were going to say. You'll definitely do that, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah,
Correct.
yep, we'll do that too. Then the next item, I just wanted to mention, at the end of 3, the engineer noted, we defer to the zoning officer regarding compliance with the dwelling type ratio. The way I read that is you had to have at least 50% singles and no more than 50% of not singles. So we thought having all singles complied. That was the way we read that.
The detention basin, kind of to the west of the
Yep.
development, it looks like that'll be merged with an existing detention basin on township property.
Yep.
So who, once you merge it, who will maintain the expanded detention basin?
We have proposed that we would take that over.
Okay, so you'll
Okay.
take that off the township's hands
Yeah.
in terms of maintenance.
Reese, correct? You've agreed to do that.
That is correct.
Yep. So that was our proposal. So, yeah. So, and then if you recall, one of the things that I think in one of our many times before here, there was discussion, but probably wasn't finalized, was the balance of that open space. Was there an interest with combining that with the park? The way we thought it ended up was put a connection on the walking path along the front through that area to the park. We're willing to do that, but we're willing to, we will take feedback as to what ideas the township may have, the planning commission, the engineer, or what Mr. Jones has on how you want to integrate that with the assurance that we've said the developer is going to agree to take over the pond part for on maintenance, but there is other recreation area left that literally becomes part of the park in terms of there won't be much of a demarcation. We're open to suggestions as to how the township might want that to look.
So you don't think you're gonna have to use that for spray irrigation for water quality?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I don't know that we need all of that, is what Rob said. So the engineer said, we certainly will need some of that, but if there's some integration beyond just the path, let us know and we'll look at that. But yes, some of that will have to be that.
I would suggest you talk to the township solicitor as to how maintenance of the expanded pond is going to work, since the pond will be split on 2 different properties.
Sure.
It's a little bit tricky.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's going to be some kind of an easement or an agreement or
Right.
whatever it is, but please talk to the township solicitor and
Yeah.
get that issue resolved.
We will do that.
Any other questions, comments from the
Yeah.
planning commission?
Just one thing, I think this is probably about half of the amount of units as the original plan. And I think that was a big concern from the public and everyone, that just the quantity, the number of units. So I do think this seems like a reasonable compromise.
Yeah.
Thought it looked good in that respect.
And then I only had one more item that I wanted to ask a question on, and that was number 18. When we went to the zoning board, we had indicated when we explained that there was no way to not have a reverse frontage lot and a loop road, to completely incompatible thing, it just wouldn't work. We had indicated that the strip above the walking path for 10 feet behind the homes would be HOA owned and maintained. So that was where we were planning to do the buffer. So I think we still were inclined to do that and then work with the township on placing the buffer in that area. I mean, does that, well, I mean, what do you, I just want to see what you're looking for, Nate, along that back, because we did leave a 10-foot area between the roadway out and the back of the lot, which we could then have HOA maintained buffer in that area without having it on the lots themselves. So I don't know what your thought is. Are you looking for more than that in the rear? Do you think it's best? Because that was our thought, was it was best to keep it the HOA maintained area along, I guess it'd be 14 through 22.
We'd need to talk about what we could fit in there from a vegetative standpoint.
Okay.
I mean, it would really come down to the species, because when you think about full-size evergreen trees, they get much wider than 10 feet.
Yeah.
So if it's going to be the responsibility of the HOA to maintain it, I mean, a lot of it will probably come down to the landscape architecture plan on
Okay.
what gets chosen.
All
That's,
right.
that's my feedback right now.
Okay, yeah. So we'll take a look at that and see if we propose something that stays within there. And if not, we'll have to figure it out. Because then and theoretically would make those lots 10 feet deeper. But, you know, if the buffer is on 15 feet, right now it would be on both the homeowner lot and the HOA and the HOA. But we can talk about what the best way is to do that.
Is there a way you can shift maybe lots 1 through 8, shift them to the south a little bit and create a little strip of land between lots 7 and 8 so that someone maybe who lives on lot 13 or 14 can get to the walking trail at the park without having to go all the way around into the stormwater open space? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Create a
So is it-
small sliver between lots 7 and 8 so that you don't, I think people are going to be cutting through at, 6, 7, 8, or 9 to get to that trail into the park.
Is there any requirement? Is there a separation distance, Brian, between Mcconaughey Road and the driveway for one? Is that, because I'm wondering if that's why he put that driveway there.
So it would have been the same, same requirement for the reverse frontage lots, reverse frontage and those side lots as the 75-foot buffer. But if
Okay.
you got a variance from that, I don't know.
Yeah, so we can look at that if we could, so it's good, because essentially, he left open space between one and the roadway, right?
Mhm.
So if there was not a design criteria that he can't meet by shifting one down, I can see if he can do that.
We'll just need to make sure that if you explore that there's enough room for either fencing or buffer planting, preferably
Right.
buffer planting for the houses in 7 and 8
Yeah,
for privacy.
And I guess my other comment would be the trail on the detention basin open space sort of just ends abruptly at the property line. And it looks, if you could extend it, I don't know what the scale is. It looks like it's maybe you extend it another 100 feet, you could punch it through to the existing walking trail. And I know that would be on township property, but is that something that you could look at?
Reese, do you have any issue with that?
Yes, that's something that we can look into.
Okay, so,
It would be nice that your trail just doesn't end abruptly at the property line and goes right into the existing township trail. That would seem to make some sense.
I completely agree with that.
Mr. Chairman, you raised a question about that. The answer I should know perhaps. Is there any concern about liability with the process or with the HOA? Hurt on these trails? We all want the trail. We want just a person. It's a society. Is there, has that been looked at? Or do you know?
yeah, I believe, I'd have to check, but I think there's law that limits liability when there's, it's like the recreation actors, when you have a trail that's open to the public like that.
The risk kind of thing?
Yeah,
Well, I think it adds protection to the property owner if they
Yeah.
open their land up to the public for recreation use. So there's some protection for the property.
yeah.
But-
Also, to the township, somebody that HOA goes and gets hurt on the township.
Well, the township already has certain protections
Yeah.
and limitations on liability.
Yeah,
Side trip.
yeah, you're what, governmental immunity?
Governmental
right?
immunity.
Yeah, I assume you know about that, Mr. Weil. Okay, so that's all the questions I had. I mean, and I guess my question would be, other than the comments we've got, if there's nothing patently offensive about this, our plan is to file a subdivision plan now and move to the next step.
Yeah, I think you heard the big concern is just make sure there's enough room
Yep.
for each lot that people can put sheds and decks
Yep.
and things like that.
Yep, and we'll work on that.
I have two very quick questions. I know that the number of units was significantly reduced. Do you remember what the maximum number was in any of those plans? There were so many.
Yeah.
The 40s?
Yeah, there was
44?
one in the high 40s
Yeah,
that
okay.
we showed Nate. When we came here, I think it was down to 40 or something.
Yeah.
We removed the one row, didn't we, Nate? On
Right, we removed the run row, so I think it was 40.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think by
so
the
it's-
time we got
so
here,
it's
it was
reduced by
about
about half.
40.
Give or
Yeah.
take half. And then will parking be permitted on the street? I mean, I would think on the turns, it would be very challenging, but.
Yeah. Reese, have you considered that?
Not this time, but I feel like that's something that we can address with our engineer.
We'll
I think
see.
you bring up a good point. Is the street going to be public or private?
Reese?
I believe there was talk before in one of our meetings that the township was possibly interested in taking over it as a public road.
But we have an HOA and we'll,
But everything's up for discussion.
Is the street, just to allow that option at some point in the future, the option to dedicate it to the township, is the street, does it meet township road requirements? Are you designing it to what would be a private street requirement? Do you know?
I don't know at this time. That would be a question I need to ask my engineer.
All right, well, just be careful about that, because if you do intend to give it to the township, you don't want to design it to some lesser standard.
Yeah.
Because then you're not going to be able to do that.
Thank you for that input. I would definitely take that into consideration with my engineer.
I think be to public standards.
And I believe the right of way is shown here is 50 feet and the cartway is 30, which I believe that does meet the
Yeah.
minimum township requirements. Obviously, there's no details
Yeah,
about paving spec or anything like that, but
Because I think it would
wasn't
be,
a comment, so I thought it was,
right
but I
away.
didn't want to.
it would probably be
Yeah, that's
difficult
right.
for a homeowners association with only 20 property owners to maintain a road. I think that you're looking at a heavy lift for the homeowners association. But that's an issue that I
That's
know
fair.
is debated at the commissioner level. So you might want to see the commissioners as to
Correct.
whether or not they're willing to take the roads. That might be an issue you want answered sooner rather than later.
Understood.
All right, any other comments or questions? All right, we'll open it up to the public. Any comments from the public?
Checking to see if we have anybody in the chat here. If you are a member of the public and you want to type a chat, please feel free while this member of the public speaks here in
All right, we have
person.
a question. Mr. Robert?
No question, just a
A
statement.
statement.
that I would like to thank the applicant and his attorney and so forth for listening to the township and trying to move it in this direction. I think they've done a great job of trying to accommodate the wishes of the township, and would like to commend them for their plan.
Thank you.
And please come back to every meeting.
All right, well, this is only a sketch plan, so the planning
Yep.
commission doesn't need to take action, and we'll see you probably in a couple of months.
Yeah, hopefully. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the preliminary final land development plan of NH Mukhenjee, PA1 LLC. Nate, you want to
Yep.
bring the plan up and review it?
I am. All right, and for members of the public, I'm starting the screen share here momentarily. Okay. We have the updated plan here for the neighborhood hospital that has been previously brought before the Planning Commission and now the Board of Commissioners for conditional use hearing. I should note to the Planning Commission, just so everybody's aware, the Board of Commissioners directed the Township Solicitor to put together a conditional use decision for approval for this. which I don't know if it has been circulated yet, but they did vote in the affirmative to proceed forward from a conditional use perspective. What's before us tonight was previously a preliminary plan. We're looking at a preliminary final plan now. So that's a new waiver request, but staff takes no exception to that, given the detail of the plan. I'll be frank, for members of the public, includes a neighborhood hospital, which you can see here fronting upon Route 100, where the old Weiss where the current old Weiss is. That would be demoed and the new neighborhood hospital would be put in. And there is a medical office building proposed at the rear of the site in the northeast corner. There's ancillary parking. I should note one thing that we have discussed consistently with partners in Mukhenjee Borough, but also with members of the public is it's our anticipation that this proposed development will reduce traffic from its prior traffic load on the site. And the current improvements on site are also reducing and ameliorating stormwater issues in this generalized area. So we're getting an improvement on both ends there. It's also our expectation we're getting an improvement in terms of lighting. The lighting will be dark sky compliant, so there'll be less glare from what's currently there. We have received and reviewed prior renderings that we're quite comfortable with in terms of architectural scale and integrity. The only comment we had was the amount of EFS, but beyond that, both the buildings looked great. We did speak at the conditional use hearing about the need for privacy with the residents at the rear of the site in the north. The applicant and the board and staff talked about either fogging or screening on the north side windows of the medical office building so that the users would have privacy and the residents would have privacy as well. We were given a rendering at that point in time, and staff felt perfectly comfortable with that achieved its end goal of ensuring that there'd be that privacy factor. Frankly, we're quite pleased with where everything's at to date. We just have one comment from a planning perspective, which I think is actually quite vital given the amount of feedback that we've received from abutting residences, and which has been a discussion point, which is specifically just the need for the continued buffering on the north end of the site. The existing tree line buffer has been suffering from some sort of a fungus or disease for some time. In a recent windstorm, one of the larger trees fell down. It fell down onto an abutting residence. It was an older growth tree. It went into their yard. I don't know if it's been broken up yet and taken care of, but that buffer as it currently sits is likely not long for this world as it's currently designed. We've recommended that however it gets worked out, that an arborist get in there, figure out which trees are the most damaged, which can be saved, which cannot. The current landscape plan is recommending patching that buffer, which we take no exception with. I do believe that there are blue spruces that are proposed. I would highly advise that we be careful because those are ones that are suffering from some of these fungus infections right now. So we might want to look at a different species. But the other thing that we have assured applicants, we have assured abutters of and have expressed to the applicant is the need for one of our Class C buffers to ensure that that privacy factor is there. So that would include a mix of deciduous and evergreen plantings, shrubs, and then grasses and perennials that they see fit for ornamental purposes for their potential clientele who's coming into the site. But the big thing for us is, and I use it in no short terms, we just need to create a green wall for the next door neighbors. And that was discussed previously. That was really kind of one of the only discussion points. So beyond that, the rain garden or the infiltration basin that also takes on the rain garden looks wonderful. Everything else on the site has been coming along really great. That's just the only comment that we have. And that's just based off of the number of phone calls we've received from people in the next door neighborhood. So I have no other planning comments. In fact, we're quite comfortable with everything else at this point, other than hashing out this planting situation. Beyond that, if there are any technical items, I'd hand it over to Brian.
Okay, thanks, Nate. I'd like to point out that some of the larger revisions that have occurred since the last plan was here is some of the internal intersection alignment. The applicant has realigned some of those intersections so that they're directly across each other. They're not staggered, which we certainly appreciate. And the stormwater management calcs that were provided this round are much better and really address the majority of our concerns for stormwater management. Our outstanding concerns are
Landscape buffer, as Nate had mentioned, we certainly want to have that addressed. And that the Class C buffer is provided for the ordinance. As well as while the traffic is being reduced, our traffic engineer had provided a handful of comments that still need to be addressed, particularly with the traffic for the site so that we can ensure that there's adequate parking. And then I think we're also looking for a lot area calculation or an opinion from our zoning officer for the lot area calculation that we discussed. If the township parcel, if the Lower Mcconaughey Borough parcel is included in some of those lot area calculations. So those are our, I'm sorry, the impervious lot, building coverage and impervious area for the site. We just wanted to get feedback from the zoning officer to understand if the borough lot area is included in that calculation or not.
Attorney Lehrer is present on behalf of the applicant. If you could just introduce your team.
Sure. To my right is Mike Lardy from Land Corps, who's part of our design and engineering team, and then Denise Valenta from Embry as the project manager.
Any
The only
issue-
other, yeah, I'm sorry. The only other thing that we would just add is because this does incorporate some land within the borough, we did appear before Borough Council within the last 2 weeks. They did approve conditionally the plan as it applies to the borough. Not to make an issue of it, because I know that this is deferring it to the zoning officer who will be rendering a decision, but our position is that what's in the borough is the borough's jurisdiction. They've approved it conditionally. What's in the township is the township's, and to my knowledge, it is one lot. So to say that we would have to meet independent lot requirements in each municipality would not make sense. I don't think it's consistent with it. But again, we're not objecting to it. I think the recommendation is that the zoning officer just needs to weigh in on that. So.
Comments or questions from the planning commission?
Almost ready to go.
You heard a lot of comments about the buffer tonight. Are there any issues with putting the Class C buffer in? I believe it might even be a condition of the conditional use approval.
It is. It was a recommended from the planning commission, conditional use approval, and it did, I believe, make its way into the decision. Yes.
So any issues with putting the Class C buffer in?
Well, it is a condition of conditional use, so we've agreed to do it. And I think we are prepared to do it. I think, I don't know if you want to talk to, there was maybe some
Yes.
additional thinking there in terms of.
And Nathan, I'll defer to your judgment if you think this is a conversation for us to work out with staff, or now is the forum for it. There was just one item with regard to I think we're good with the plantings, the planting density and species that are required in a type C buffer. We note that the body of the zoning ordinance gives certain conditions where a berm may be allowed, whereas the design guidelines specify that a berm must be installed. So we're wrestling with that because clearly trying to install a 6 to 8 foot tall berm with 3 to 1 side slopes in that buffer is it's gonna wipe out the trees that are there.
Well, that's why we did that. That was on purpose, recognizing that every site might have an issue. When we recommend a Class C buffer for a brand new site, especially one of larger scale and size, a 6 to 8 foot berm is necessary. Obviously, and my review letter mentioned a modified Class C buffer. It was with the recognition that we're dealing with a smaller site here.
Okay.
And to meet the slope on that, to make that work on a site of this size and scale with the existing tree line there, we would clearly need to look at modifying it. And that's just for practical purposes.
Because we noted there is a separate section pertaining to the preservation of existing trees. So there was a little, but
Right.
I understand where you're coming from.
There's wiggle room here because we do want to keep that existing tree line, not the sick trees, of course, but we do want to keep the existing tree line. And obviously, if we're going to patch it, that's recommended as well. But a modified Class C buffer would essentially, in my point of view, be, and I spoke with the zoning officer on this as well, we do have the leeway for that. You can't fit a berm in there. But starting with the plantings that are required between the deciduous, the evergreen, the shrubs and whatnot, That's what we were looking for.
Thank you.
All right, any other comments, questions from the planning commission? We'll open it up to the public. Any comments or questions from the public at this time?
If you are on the Zoom meeting and you have questions or comments, now's a good time for you to type them in so we can address them with the applicants. Just saying for the 4 attendees online right now.
Attorney Lair, I think you received a copy of the draft motion. Have you had a chance to take a look at that and the conditions that are presented in the draft motion?
Yes, we have reviewed it as well as the applicant representatives, and they are acceptable to us.
Thank you.
We don't have anybody typing anything, so.
All right, at this time, we'll entertain a motion. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion. This is a motion to recommend approval of the proposed NH Mukhenjee PA 1 UT LLC preliminary final condition upon the following. Sure. Compliance with all Lower Mukhenjee Township engineer, Lower Mukhenjee Township traffic engineer, Mukhenjee Borough engineer, Lower Mukhenjee Township Planning Department and zoning officer review letters. Compliance with any and all conditions set forth in conditional use approval by the Lower Mukhenjee Township Board of Commissioners. The applicant shall construct the proposed buildings in conformity with the testimony and exhibits. The structure shall conform to all design requirements as set forth in the zoning code, chapter 27. The applicant shall submit detailed color elevations at the time of building permit application to be reviewed by the township review officer, township zoning officer, and township planning department for compliance with this condition. The applicant shall reduce the amount of EIFS cladding on the proposed structures in favor of other architectural cladding that is in line with the Lower Mukhenjee Township design guidelines to the written satisfaction of the township zoning officer and township planning department. The applicant shall install monument signs and streetscape enhancements along Main Street, Route 100, that include a masonry street wall or fence as depicted in formal submissions to the written satisfaction of the township planning department and township engineer. The applicant shall plant a modified Class C buffer along the existing evergreen tree line to further shield and buffer residences in abutting neighborhoods from the proposed development. This buffer shall be designed by a certified landscape architect and reviewed and approved to the written satisfaction of the township engineer, township zoning officer, and township planning department. The existing buffer of evergreen trees between the residential lots and the property shall be thinned, cleared of any dead or dying trees, inspected by an arborist to address any current disease or fungus infecting the evergreens, and maintained thereafter in perpetuity. The arborist inspection report shall be sent to the township engineer and township planning department prior to final action on the land development application by the Board of Commissioners. The applicant shall install two-way privacy fogging or film on all north-facing windows of the medical office building to ensure privacy of residents abutting the MOB and privacy of patients in the medical office building. This privacy fogging or film shall be reviewed and approved by the township zoning officer and township planning department prior to final action on the land development application by the Board of Commissioners. All on-site lighting shall be designed by a certified electrical lighting engineer, shall comply with all applicable township codes, and shall meet dark sky standards. The preliminary and final land development site plan shall be designed to meet the applicable release rate criteria as noted in the township stormwater management ordinance, and the stormwater discharge from the site shall not be altered to affect the abutting properties. The applicant shall comply with resolution 2019-23 titled Resolution in Support of Marketing and Branding Initiatives by Commercial Property Owners, Developers, and Business Operators to incorporate Lower Mukhenjee Township in all signage and marketing materials. The applicant and their successors in interest shall be responsible for the maintenance and any needed replacement of all on-site landscaping per the approval plan in perpetuity. The applicant shall not appear before the Board of Commissioners to seek preliminary final plan resolution of approval until obtaining review letters addressing outstanding comments by township reviewing bodies and at the recommendation of the Township Planning Department. I'm going to do the further motion now.
Yeah, let's put the waivers in as well.
Okay. I'll make a further motion on the following waivers. A waiver from Saldo Section 22A-501 requiring the submission of a separate preliminary and final plan. Number two, a waiver from Saldo Section 23A-307.8 requiring half foot of freeboard above the maximum pool elevation of the 100-year runoff event for infiltration basin INF1. And number three, a denial of zoning section 27-1803.1 as the item is a zoning requirement of section 27 and a variance from the Lower Mukhenjee zoning hearing board would be proper jurisdiction and required, and further is in conflict from the prior recommended conditional use recommendation, sorry.
All right, thank you, Amy. Is there a second to the motion? We have a second. Is there any further comment? Number three in the motion, in the waivers.
So there was a request that was made for partial relief from some of the landscaping requirements for the buffers, and that's technically zoning ordinance. So we as a planning commission cannot do that. That has to go to the zoning hearing board. So it was the wrong agency body making a recommendation. Planning commission, they'd have to go to the ZHB.
Does the applicant understand why we're recommending denial of the third waiver request?
So I think that's in conjunction with some of the discussion.
Okay. All right. So again, we have a motion to recommend conditional approval of the preliminary final plan and also to recommend approval of two waiver requests and denial of one other waiver request for being in front of the wrong body. Any final comments before we move on to a vote? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion approved by a vote of 6-0. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next item on the agenda is Posh Proposed Commercial Development, Preliminary and Final Plan. Nate, if you want to review the planning issues.
Sure thing. We're starting up here on the screen share as previously for members of the public who may be watching. I should note for the record, as we had previously mentioned at the last appearance of the Posh Group for this land development plan, that this was really waiting on one item in particular, and that was the review and approval of the emergency access road for the Township Fire Marshal. I should note we've had a couple of rather severe fires in the township. I'm sure everybody has read that in the newspaper and seen it on 69 News over the last couple of weeks, which is what appears to me have led to a delay in some of the review that we're getting. They've had to go out to the apartment building and some of the other fires in the township when it comes to reviewing the structure. That being said, we are in a position where we did tell the applicant that this item would be on the agenda again this month. As far as I'm concerned, there are no outstanding planning items. We've covered everything. For those watching at home or on YouTube after this, the use consists of a self-storage facility and a daycare center. We mentioned proper buffering from the residences to the south. The applicant has provided that to us. We've also recommended adequate buffering of the play area for the daycare center, and that has been addressed as well. One thing that we did talk about internally on multiple occasions was the ability of vehicles to traverse the site internally. That's a technical item I'll let the township engineer speak to. They have voluntarily put in a walking path to the cul-de-sac on Schuler Lane to ensure that the school buses for the school districts would be able to pick up and drop off students from the daycare center. And they've now included on three sides between parking and the emergency access road right up along the structure, an emergency access for fire or life safety if necessary. The basin is at the rear of the site. It's proposed to be naturalized. The applicants did receive numerous zoning reliefs in terms of setback with respect to their lot lines, in particular in the right of way at the northeastern section of the site here along Route 78. You can see the proximity to the lot line there. And one thing I did speak with the applicant's representation about, because we're working so hard on our Hamilton Boulevard plan, and now with all these developments coming in, we've been talking about streetscape enhancements and plantings along Hamilton Boulevard. One of the things the plan called for originally was gateway signs as well. We have spoken previously with Seoka with respect to their monument gateway sign for welcome to Lower Mukhenjee. We did ask if there would be interest on the plan here for thank you for visiting Lower Mukhenjee. And that's just something that we would throw out there because it's in our planning documents if you read the Hamilton Boulevard corridor plan. So beyond that, I have no further comments. We were waiting on that one item. One way or the other, I think we do owe the applicants, especially with our time clock, some action tonight.
Thank you, Nate.
Brian, do you have anything?
Yeah, similarly, we did not do a review on this since there hasn't been a new application, so we really don't have any further comment beyond our discussions from last meeting. Our primary outstanding concern is going to be the review and approval from the fire marshal. Thank you.
All right, any comments, questions from the planning commission at this point? Comments from the applicant, and why don't you just introduce yourself and your team?
Sure, Eric Schock from Fitzpatrick, Winston, Buba.
Jason Posh with Posh Properties. Seth Gaiman with Bowler Engineering.
Just so everyone understands where we are, we asked the applicant to wait a month so that our fire marshal would have a chance to take a look at the access road around the building. Unfortunately, our fire marshal has not been able to comment on that. So I don't think we want to delay the applicant further. He's cooperated with us in giving us another month.
And giving you the sign.
And giving us a sign.
Right, as long as it's not from a precious metal, and we'll work with Mr. Jones on getting an appropriate sign.
It has to be nickel.
Now, I think one of the conditions would be that the fire marshal ultimately sign off on the access road.
Yeah, and in the beginning of this, you did have conversations, so you're comfortable.
Yes, there was a review on an earlier version of the plan, and the comments that were provided in that, as well as comments that were provided directly to Nate, I believe we have addressed those satisfactorily. So
Yeah,
I think
I
at this
mean-
point, it's just getting the final, sign off saying that they're good.
Yeah, it's not as if there was nothing done. It just is, we submitted in December, and for whatever reason, we don't have the final sign off.
But you still have to get it. That's, I guess my point is,
Yeah.
it's not that we're ignoring or
Right.
just forgetting.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think last time, my suggestion was you recommend us last time with that same condition. So we're no different, right?
It might have been.
Yeah, and I can confirm that. And again, one of the things that we've thought about internally on that end too, which was discussed, was just making sure that when wintertime rolls around, because of the material that this road is going to be, that it is maintained, it is plowed, it is marked. And that's just because we get 12 inches of snow. It needs to, be clear and serviceable. Fires happen in winter too, so.
All right, we'll open it up to public comment. Any comment from the public? Comment from those people participating remotely? You can just type in your comment or question using the chat feature. That's while we wait for that, just to make sure that all the planning commission members are comfortable moving forward with the plan, making a recommendation tonight. And Attorney Schock, I think you received the draft conditions of approval.
Yes.
Have you had a chance to take a look at that? And do you have
Yes,
any
and I've
issues with it?
I've reviewed it with my client and the engineer. They're accepting.
Thanks. Okay, at this point, we'll entertain a motion. Is there a motion? Amy, you're you're going to take care of this again for us?
Motion to recommend approval of the Posh Properties proposed commercial development preliminary final plan conditioned upon the following. Number one, compliance with all township engineer, planning department, and zoning officer review letters to the written satisfaction of each. Number two, the applicant and their successors in interest shall be responsible for the maintenance, and any needed replacement of all on-site landscaping per the approval plan in perpetuity. Then number 3, the applicant shall construct the proposed fire access drive to the written satisfaction of the township engineer to ensure appropriate accessibility prior to planning recording. Number 4, the applicant shall install a lit monument sign visible from the outbound lane of Hamilton Boulevard reading, "Thank you for visiting Lower Mcconju Township." The applicant may note beneath, "Courtesy of Posh Storage and Kitty Academy." The monument sign shall be reviewed and approved by the township zoning officer and planning department and placed on the final plan prior to recording. Number 5, all structures shall be constructed matching design renderings presented to the township and reviewed and approved to the written satisfaction of the township zoning officer and township planning department prior to the issuance of building permits. A further motion to grant the following waivers and deferrals. Number 1, a waiver from section 22A-401 and 22A-501 requiring the separate submission of a preliminary and final plan. A waiver from section 22A-403.4.g requiring the plan to show existing underground utilities, sidewalks, and other man-made features within 200 feet of the boundaries of the proposed project area. And number 3, a waiver from section 22A-403.4.h from the requirement to show existing underground utilities, sidewalks, and other man-made features within 200 feet of the boundaries of the proposed project area.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Is there a second? There's a motion and a second to recommend conditional approval of the preliminary final land development plan for Posh Properties. As part of that motion and second, we're recommending the approval of 3 waivers. Is there any further comment? All right, we'll move on to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries by a vote of 6-0. Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Next on the agenda is the plan modification for Mukhenjee Crossings, also known as Home Depot. Nate, you want to review the planning issues?
Sure thing. For the edification of the Planning Commission and those who may be watching from home, this plan is actually going to be a administrative modification of plan. And the reason for that is it's with respect to NPDS permitting and some minor parking area changes. It does not change a vast majority of the site. So this does qualify for our administrative review process. However, we wanted to bring it before the Planning Commission to make sure that 1, the Planning Commission was aware, but 2, that members of the public were aware that it is true, if you have heard it, there is now interest in following through on the Home Depot site on Hamilton Boulevard. We've received a lot of questions about that, so this is a good opportunity for us to make it public. And also note that there have been some modifications to the plan that we feel are going to be beneficial in terms of future site development. So the plan that you're seeing here in front of you now is the modified plan, which actually includes less parking spaces. The applicants are enjoying our new zoning ordinance. As everyone knows, as we talked through the rezoning of 2019, our sites were consistently overparked with a lot of extra asphalt. This is now going to allow not only for the Home Depot store to go in at the site, but also for other future development areas to open up, which would create a more shopping village, service village type of setting, which is what we'd like to see in our corridor on Hamilton Boulevard. So there's future area 1, 2, and 3 here. As the applicants will note, there's no user projected for that yet. The only planning note that I would have that is not included in the plan before you hear this evening is that they would all be designed architecturally cohesively in terms with our new ordinance and our Hamilton Boulevard corridor plan. And we have spoken with the applicants about that on a couple of occasions. That being said, they are working on stormwater at the management of the site. I'll let the engineer speak to the status of that. But I would like to show everybody, because this is obviously something that I think for the benefit of the public will have some of the most impact. We've been talking about facade and site design and how it's actually going to look. So This is the drawing. We spent a lot of time speaking with the representative from Home Depot, and we really appreciate the partnership with them on this because we do think that this is going to look like a really handsome site on the boulevard. In addition to, you'll see here, in addition to the frontage of the major opening and entrance of the structure from the store at the parking lot, this is a side view, and you will see that it does create more or less a storefront view from Hamilton Boulevard, which we wanted to try and emulate. So there was that street front presence. So they've really kind of taken what's on the side, on the front, and put it on the side as well, which we'd like to commend them for. We do think that that's going to be a great improvement. There's going to be heavy use of stacked stone on the site, which we think is in line with what we're trying to achieve in terms of our materials moving forward. And the hope is that can then resonate throughout the rest of the development when sections 1 through 3 get developed. The garden center is up here at the north part of the site. That's more or less, as I'm sure everybody knows, kind of a separate area. And then they have the tool rental area here at the southern end of the site. The view from the southern end of the site shows you the street facade that you'll see from Hamilton Boulevard, while keeping with a lot of the other design factors that you see at Home Depot's used regularly. So we're very happy with how this has turned out from an architectural standpoint to date, and we're excited to see how the future of the site with development areas 1, 2, and 3 turn out. But the goal is shared parking. The goal is cross-pollination, where people will, grab a bite to eat while they shop here. That's what we try to intend to do, and what was done with Hamilton Crossing. It's what we'd like to hopefully see here eventually as well. So beyond that, everything else is really technical. It's currently being reviewed by the Township Engineer's Office with respect to the NPDES and the stormwater for the site. And as far as the Township Zoning Officer and I are concerned, at least the structure of Home Depot itself, as you see right here, is in line with everything that we're looking for. So with that, I'd hand it over to Brian and you, Mr. Chair, to talk to any other points that may come up.
Sure, thank you, Nate. So yeah, just like to reiterate, we have not done a formal review of this site. The applicant's currently revising stormwater management facilities. So until we get a final design on those facilities, or you'll have a submission to the Conservation District, then we'll go through and actually review the stormwater management. We've been involved with the pre-application meetings with the Conservation District. So it's currently an ongoing process, but there's not much to add beyond that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bud, if you just want to introduce yourself and your team.
Yes, I'm Bud Newton from Newton Engineering. This is Doug Kirkus from Greenberg Farrell. They're the site expediters, I guess, and coordinators for Home Depot for this project. And I think, as everyone knows, this is a much delayed project. The project originally had final approval from the township in 2006. Home Depot came in and they did the public improvements with the project. They installed most of the utilities. They installed the new high volume driveway, the traffic light, all those other facilities. They had the site pretty well far along, but they never constructed the building. Now they're ready to come in and construct the building. As Nate mentioned, that one of the benefits with this is that since then, at the time that we came through in 2005 and 2006, the township had what they considered to be their anti-big box ordinance. So they were requiring that as part of a shopping center that had a big box, that the buildings had a 50-foot buffer along Hamilton Boulevard and a 150-foot setback from Hamilton Boulevard. So that because of that, the building was placed on the site where it was, and we were limited in what we could do. And also, we had the high parking demand. We needed 656 parking spaces for Home Depot at the time that we did this. With today's standards per ITE parking generation, we need 384. So we are providing the 384, but also we're providing additional spaces. As you know, Home Depot has sheds, they have trucks, they have other things that they have some equipment and things that they store. We provided extra spaces for all those things. So if you look at the site, when you look at the site plan, it does have a listing on the top of all those other spaces besides that. Also, as Nate mentioned before, the previous plan had the garden center on the Hamilton Boulevard side, on the right-hand side. It was decided that the site worked better for Home Depot if they flipped the garden center to the north side. And that also allowed that the area of residual parking that we had on the north side of the building can be used for the seasonal sales. And one that puts that outside of the view from Hamilton Boulevard, also kind of hides it back in the corner there. The site, if you drove by the site, you know there is a fence around the entire perimeter that was put in originally with the original project. So we're in the process now, as Brian mentioned, we are working with the Conservation District and DEP to get a new NPDS permit. The developer allowed the NPDS permit to expire. Since the BMPs were already in place for the project, they were giving us some credit towards that, but we still have to get a new permit. So we're working on that right now. They are requiring some additional improvements from what they did before. At the time we got the original permit, we were required to handle the water quality for the site at one of our locations. Now they require us to do it at both of the locations where water leaves the site. So we have some water that goes to the Cedar Creek on the east, and we have some water that goes to the Little Lehigh on the west. So previously we had water quality for the pond, what we call Pond B, that went to the Cedar Creek. But now we're also in Pond A that goes to the Lehigh. We're going to provide additional storage, and we're going to put another pump station in there. We're going to do spray irrigation out of that basin also. We've contacted PennDOT with the proposal. PennDOT feels that the improvements that were done previously out there satisfy this current condition. The high volume driveway that was installed still satisfies the driveway criteria. The only thing that they're asking for is that we go back and update all the signage, all the pavement markings, that they want to come out after, when we're ready to open, and go over what's out there and make sure everything's up to current quality standards, and all the repairs and stuff were done. A couple other benefits with this new plan. If you notice, there is some 40-foot high mast lights out there on the site. We are converting everything over to the current township standards. We're removing those 40-foot high standards, doing all 25-foot high standards, and they all be new LED lighting that complies with the township standards. We also have a substantial amount of screening that's going in the lumber area, in the rear, and the equipment area. In the front, it all has a 10-foot high screening fence around it so that they'll be shaded from the neighbors. We really don't have much as far as neighbors with this. So we have, the Red Maple Mobile Home Park behind us, but there is some separation, and we do have fencing and stuff back there already. We have some properties over there on the east side of the property. There's a dentist office back there. The dentist on the lane that you hear on the TV all the time is back there in the corner. But we don't have much as far as other properties around us. Basically, the utilities and everything else on the site are going to work basically the way they were originally designed. We don't have to go back out in the PennDOT right away for anything. We have water already brought in the site. We have sewer brought in the site. We have gas brought onto the site. And there's electric and communications that are already in the site. So this is basically coming in and trying to finish a project that was started in 2006. With that, then John's been working with the township and with Home Depot and WD Architects, who are designing the building on the building. John, you want to talk about the building and changes from the prototype?
Sure. Well, thank you very much for allowing us to present. I'd like to thank both the planning and the engineering department. They have great coordination and cooperation from staff. It's been really good. As Nathan had mentioned, what you probably, if I'm not sure who was on the board back in 2000 and
Maury.
I'm sure he can attest to the fact that what was originally planned as the building was quite simply a monotone concrete panel box. I believe there was an in vestibule and out vestibule with a standing seam orange metal roof. The garden center was just chain link fence around 3 sides, and the lumber canopy was, quite frankly, 2 poles holding up once again an orange metal seam roof. What we have here are, enhanced articulations, and this actually is not even the prototype front. This is an enhanced version of it as well. Let's stick with the front. So, for instance, over the front entrance, we have the articulation of the stacked stones and the pilasters. There is a a metal canopy with columns. Behind the signage is like a clapboard. It's a, what do you call that? Hardy plank. It's a hardy plank. While the panels are concrete panels, the bases are stamped to look like block. And as it goes up, we use the metal, the orange band, and in the vertical plane to kind of break it up, we're also using two different colors in certain panels. So we try to take the long, continuous, monotone appearance of the prior approved building and begin to break it up, again, using the stacked stone. I think also we're using this, Nathan, if you can help me, one of the buildings you referenced for the entrance canopy where we use the metal, maybe it harkens back to some of the metal foundries from the area as well. If you'd slide back to the garden center. Prior, the garden center, quite frankly, was just a black chain link metal fence. Didn't have an articulated entrance like that. Once again, we use stacked stone, and you see the clapboard finish behind the signage. If you would slide just to the other end. And again, vastly improved lumber canopy. Once again, where the structure that holds up the canopy is of the stacked stone, and then the tool rental center is articulated as even a separate entrance with the same metal, like a smaller metal canopy than the front had. Once again, with the clapboard along the corner. And the other thing, as Nathan had mentioned, and even Bud, we had the garden center facing Hamilton, and that was just a plain paneled, concrete paneled facade. Where now we are giving, once again, the appearance that we're breaking it up and to provide sort of like a false front, if you will. We're not really encouraging people to go there, but it's taking over the pilasters of the stacked stone. And we're introducing that metal band that we have as part of the canopy in the front. Almost, it's not going to stick out. It may have like a 6 or 8 inch reveal. But again, it gives it that, it tries not to be the side of the building. It tries to give it a little more articulation. Where just above that is on the northern, let's call it the northern facade, is, the garden center. And the garden center fence now is a vinyl coated chain link fence, where the lower, hold on a second. It's where the lower 2/3 are a tighter weave, and the upper portion is a little bit less of a weave. So that's why it looks a little darker on the bottom than in the top.
I think we certainly appreciate you incorporating certain design features to improve the appearance of the building. We appreciate your effort in that regard.
When we were first looking at this, I went back and I found the old plans and I just shook my head. I go, oh yeah, I forgot 20 years ago, these things were ugly.
Yeah, one important thing, as Nathan mentioned, is now that we have the 3 out parcels, we will be, we're going to go into comply more with the Hamilton Boulevard study with those. We're going to move them up closer to Hamilton Boulevard, but it made no sense submitting them at this time. They want to move ahead with the Home Depot store. We don't know what those users are going to be yet. So we'll be back in front of you with land development plans for those when the time comes.
Help me understand. Sure, it's probably called a third-party regulation. Reduction in parking spots, significant, 300 something.
Yes, and that was
How'd that come about?
your new ordinance, your current zoning ordinance now requires that we provide parking in accordance with the ITE parking generation study. And we went through that and compared what we had. We submitted that to Carl. Carl reviewed it and agreed that this is what the regulations would require. Now, this is slightly more than what Home Depot is looking for, where they say about 350 vehicles is what they feel they need for their use. So we're providing the 384, plus we have additional spaces where, where you have your car corrals and where they're going to have equipment or where they're going to store rental vehicles and things like that. We provide additional spaces for that.
Yeah, if I could jump in there to assist, when they initially reached out to us with respect to the site, they had mentioned that they felt comfortable in terms of a Home Depot with their stores of they can get by with 350 spaces. They utilize that in other spots. Our old ordinance required 600 and some, and for us, that would have been just empty space then. So utilizing the 80% of the ITE, which is 80% of the peak hour trips, it kind of fell almost right in line with what they felt they needed, which was good. And it opened up space for us to put other users in there. The other thing that our ordinance allows us to do then is look at shared space. So with the presumption that if I'm going to go to Home Depot, I'm going to go to whichever food user or whatnot is also on site, which is a fairly common thing. So basically, we're making smart use of the parking space now moving forward.
Why don't we just clarify, we're throwing around ITE.
Yeah.
What is ITE and why is it relevant?
Sorry. Yep.
It's the ITE is the Institute of Transportation Engineers, and it's the accepted standard for both trip generation and parking generation that we as transportation officials use.
So someone's done a study, and for this particular use, these engineers that have done the study recommend 300 and some parking spaces.
They've done statistical studies throughout the country. A lot of engineering firms and stuff submit their information from all the studies they do. IT compiles that and puts it into this publication. And
It wasn't referred to or used originally planning to put this up.
no, when we originally did it, we had, the zoning ordinance at that point in time had one space per 200 square feet for a shopping center, and that's what we.
It was
had
introduced in 2019 as part of the zoning overhaul.
And if you recall, those of you who were here when we did Hamilton Crossings like Quarry and those other projects, we oftentimes would go in and get parking relief for those projects because of how high those numbers were.
Go ahead, Mari.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Could you bring up the site plan again, Nate? That, okay, the 3 pad sites that Nate was referring to are just the part that's carved out of what had been the Home Depot parking on the other side of the main entrance road. Is a few acres of additional pad sites that's above and beyond those 3 uses. So I guess that's in a different NPDES permit, so that's the reason it's not.
No, that's the same NPDS permit, Maury. The same
Okay, so
HOP,
it's-
but there,
So it's really more than 3.
yes. Yeah, these, there is a property owner that owns the underlying property. Home Depot is renting from them.
Right.
And these other 2 parcels are controlled by RB Grange Associates, which is actually the same people that have that Trexler Town Marketplace next to our office there on Mill Creek Road with, we have Walgreens and you have Chick-fil-A. They own that property also, same property owners.
But so it's really then 5 pad sites.
Yes.
That are going to be developed in addition to the Home Depot. Just wanted to clarify. Thanks.
Yeah, and moving forward in the future, the preference with the 3 new pad sites as well as the 2 is now we're working with a common design element and scheme. The goal is to try and make sure that everything's interconnected here like we've done at Hamilton Crossings in terms of design and accessibility from one spot to the other. So you can safely get from Home Depot to whatever user ends up being here, hypothetically, if it's a restaurant or whatnot. And then working on our Hamilton corridor plan design, ensuring there's outdoor seating and making sure that it's, oriented towards the boulevard and not towards the parking spaces, so on and so forth. So we'll be working with them as those come in moving forward in the future. Right now, we're just focusing on the store, which will basically be the anchor tenant for the site.
Wes, I think you had a question? Or-
If the pad sites where the parking was the additional parking for the Home Depot, then when 3 new businesses get built there, is their parking factored into, they're going to be parking?
They'll have to provide enough parking on site They're on the parcels on the right-hand side here, these three parcels that we're talking about have to comply with the stormwater requirements and the parking requirements that were the rest of the site. So they're only allowed to have 60% impervious cover on the sites, and they have to provide their own parking based on the whatever the use is at that point in time.
Thank you.
So I think in the design element, you had mentioned that this is kind of a prototype for Home Depot, but really is more over and above than what's out there. Are there any that are similar to this? I mean, a site that you can state that, I mean, maybe we could look online just to see kind of what this different rendition looks like. I mean, everywhere I've ever gone, they look pretty much like the one that you might see on Lehigh Street or in Allentown in Whitehall.
The last one I opened was Haymarket, Virginia.
Hay, Hay?
Haymarket.
Pretty country.
Yeah. God's country out there.
I think when they originally gave this to us, it was, the first one was Denver, but doesn't have the stone.
No, yeah. We found a lot in Colorado that were utilizing stone and other elements, as well as a couple it looked like in Washington State. And then, of course, if you go down to Florida or Southern California, there's those architectural elements as well.
I'll remember it in a second.
I mean, I would just do a simple Google search to see it just for my own curiosity, but it sounds.
It opened last fall, I believe.
Okay.
Haymarket, yeah.
Interesting. And then I know in previous discussions on some of these larger developments, we've talked about having charging stations. Just preliminarily looked for the electric cars. I didn't see that on here, but is that something that would be integrated as well?
To be honest, we haven't discussed it at all, Wesley. I guess we can take it back to Home Depot.
Yeah, again, it's something we can clearly look at. Because again, the parking spaces are there, whether you designate it, doesn't mean it's.
Yeah.
So it's a parking space. It's a parking.
Well, it would be a parking space, but it would have the electric chargers, which does require, I mean, a significant improvement as far as the electric capabilities. Just curious.
I think that's a very good idea.
When we talked about it in numerous other larger scale properties.
Need a lot of those.
Yes.
With gas at $5 a gallon.
Yeah.
No, I think we can strongly recommend that you find some spots for electric charging stations. I think it's a very good idea. Are there any other comments?
Not related to that, but just based on Leslie's comment, even the other proposals we reviewed today, like the NH proposal, it should all be applicable to all new development. We should think about from a future state perspective as a commission and our overall planning to see how we can fit that into.
I think before we got derailed by 2020 and everything pandemic, we had started that conversation of things that would be in there as far as requiring.
I think they're required on a certain ratio. There's for new developments, but keep in mind, this one goes back to 2005, 2006. So they're kind of grandfathered in and the new requirements don't necessarily apply to them.
Gotcha.
Okay, so, but I think the new ordinance does have
even
charging stations.
The new ordinance.
I mean, I couldn't remember if we
The
just
new
talked about
ordinance
it or we
does
did
have
finally get it
charging
in. Okay.
stations. Yeah, it was actually put in 19. And then we were talking about it with the look back of the option of tweaking that a little bit more actually, because we were finding in smaller developments, they would still be required. So we were talking about thresholds and whatnot,
Yeah,
but it's
again,
in
it
the
was
ordinance currently. Yeah.
But would they be subject? I mean, if they're utilizing the new parking requirement, are they still subject to the old?
Well,
standard
their
they were
plan was
on?
approved under the old ordinance. So it's, they get the benefits of both worlds.
Yeah.
They get the
They
benefit.
can enjoy the new ordinance
Sure.
and protect what they want from grandfathering. But I echo that. I mean, obviously with the amount of electrical vehicles coming out now, there's no reason to at least look into it and see a couple of spots.
Wes, the photos came out of the site. Funny, but a good idea.
Okay, great. Yeah, excited. I mean, based on the renderings, it looks as nice as I've seen at Home Depot.
So that may be something we want to look at in the new ordinance. You make it, one per 25 parking spaces. Seems to be the way things are going. There'll be more of a demand in the future for charging stations.
That may be a very marketable item for the store.
Could be.
Yeah, well, I mean, with all the government funding and potentially that's coming down the road.
So you're to blame either way, Barry.
It's good.
Yeah, he was here at the time. All right, any other comments, questions from the public? This time, if you're participating remotely and you want to ask a question or make a comment, please type it in now using the chat feature.
We have a Robert Thompson who has raised their hand. If you'd like, by all means, please, you can type into the chat if you have any questions. It is open to everyone. So if you do have a question, Robert Thompson, I see that you raised your hand here. By all means, please type it in. Yeah, you can type on the icon chat section if you are on a laptop or even a smartphone.
Maybe while we wait for that person to type their question in, this is a bit of an odd situation where you have an approved plan and there's really no, as I understand it, Nate, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, there's no action for the planning commission to take at this point.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at some modifications likely to stormwater design, and the layout has changed with parking, as you can see. But this did qualify under the administrative review process for us. And that was in part to make sure that the planning commission didn't have to look at every little change that wasn't substantive to an approved plan. So we did want to have them get in front of you for feedback and comment, but the expectation is that technical review will go through the township engineer's office, and when they have a clean letter there, it'll go to the Board of Commissioners for an approval resolution. But I should note those extra areas, future development areas, would be considered a modification of plan like we've done with some of our other developments, and they will be back in front of the Planning Commission for review.
Okay, do we have a question there yet on the chat?
No, and there's still no question type. So, oh, wait, here we go. Perfect timing. It notes that the original traffic study is 16 years old. Will a new study be done? It predated Costco, Air Products, Whole Foods. Also, if potentially 5 additional businesses, would a new study be required? So I guess there's a question and a concern about traffic volume at the site.
It wasn't required by PennDOT. Nathan, we've contacted them about that. The trip generation from the Home Depot is well within the range of what was approved by the high volume driveway that was installed. There is some grandfather provisions that they were getting because of the improvements already being made out there.
So I didn't quite catch that, Bud. You say that a traffic study is not required.
We were not required to do a new traffic study. We will end up going out and maybe changing the timing on the traffic light once the Home Depot and some of the other uses get done. But as long as we stay within the boundaries of how much traffic was coming out of the site previously, we don't have to update the traffic study.
But when you say improvements that were made, you just articulate what they were?
Yeah, if you want to bring the site, can you bring the site plan up?
Sure.
Yeah, generally, the high volume driveway was installed. That included the right turn lane into the site. The center lane turn pattern out on Hamilton Boulevard was converted to a left turn pattern, both at going into this driveway and also going into Shepherd's Lane on the opposite side. We have also the right turn, right in, right out driveway that has a right turn lane going into it. That all was constructed. It was all approved by PennDOT. The traffic light was put in at the main driveway. That was all put in and approved by PennDOT. Laurie may remember it, but we had an issue with PennDOT when after it was put in because the store not being built. There's some question if PennDOT was going to let us activate the traffic light, but we were able to convince them that because of the benefit to Shepherd's, the village at Shepherd's Hill there, that we'd get more traffic coming in and out of that driveway if it was signalized, and PennDOT eventually agreed to let us operate that traffic light, since 2007 when it was installed. Once you get this, once the site builds out, because there's so little traffic coming out Shepherd's Lane, the traffic for the north side is going to dominate the side street traffic. And at that point in time, we're going to have to give more green time to the side street. And that was originally proposed with when the original traffic study was done, but it wasn't necessary to give it that time for the last 14 years that we've been waiting for the store to get built.
So is it correct to say that basically traffic coming from the west will use the light to enter the site and in theory exit the site, but most traffic from the east will use the entrance that's just before that light? Is that kind of the traffic?
Basically for the Home Depot traffic, if you're coming from the east, you go in the right turn driveway and you go out the main driveway. If you're coming from the west, you go in the main driveway. And if you're going back out to the west, you go out the right turn out driveway.
Gotcha.
All right, again, we don't have to take action tonight. There's really nothing to take action on. It's a courtesy review. And eventually you'll wind up in front of the Board of Commissioners.
Yes, thank you very much.
Will glare from lighting be minimized? It looks like that was a last question, and I think I can just jump in right there. The applicants did note that they're switching to new standards that are dark sky compliant. So quite frankly, the old lighting is going to be removed. New lighting will come in, and I would presume then that means abutting residences aren't going to see nearly as much light as they would have gotten under the old type of lighting. Yeah.
Going from the 40-foot mast arms that were permitted at that time down to the 25 per the current ordinance.
Right. Okay.
Good to see this happen.
Good.
All right, thanks.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Finally, we're at 7991 Quarry Road, preliminary final plan.
Yep, we have our last plan for the evening here. This is 7991 Quarry Road. This is the prior quarry off of Quarry Road. And I should note the new Sauerkraut Lane extension, which is currently under construction. The new site will take their frontage off of Sauerkraut when it is complete. That road's still under construction right now. So this is kind of a to be completed type of situation. But when that road is done, they will have access there. So I think it's important to note again that this site, for those who might be watching from home and had concerns, this site is prior quarry filled in. This would essentially be the last lot in this area that would be of this zoning district that would allow for a distribution or industrial use such as this. So while the one previously that the Planning Commission reviewed, lot 12 of Spring Creek Settlement Subdivision, that's right next to the site. This is the next one, and this is the last one. So we do get those questions from from our neighbors in the boroughs, as well as residents in the township. This would be the last lot in the Spring Creek Highway Industrial District. What you can see here from the plan is a similar structure to several that we're not all that unfamiliar with. There's adequate and ample truck parking, as you can see. My understanding is this is labeled as a proposed warehouse, but I do believe that there would be an automotive use to it as well. There's proposed office in the front and a proposed shop in the back. There's oversized truck parking, and then plenty of trailer storage sites around the site, as you can see. Potential rain garden in the north part of the site there. And then if I get to the landscaping plan, and I'll do that as we continue to discuss here, there's actually a lot of generous plantings out in the front. So we do appreciate that. A couple of points that did come up here. We did speak with the township solicitor on this front, so this is helpful. This site is being developed independently of the Spring Creek Settlement subdivision, so it will need to comply with our current zoning ordinances. Reason why I do bring that up is we did spend a lot of time as a township for uses such as this, making sure that there were specific amenities in place for the users of this site that would also offset concerns for residents of abutting communities, i.e. What we call amenity space. So like a driver's lounge or that type of thing so that they can rest at the site. That'll avoid off-street parking or on-street parking of trailers in our community by keeping them on site here. The same goes for electrical charging stations. That's a requirement as well so that trucks aren't idling on site, that they can utilize the electrical hookups if they are resting in the sites there. A lot of the trucks, as I'm sure everybody knows, have computers, televisions, et cetera in them. One thing to note, we are talking about potential rain gardens here. We do have a naturalization requirement for all of our stormwater. That's mutually beneficial for everybody because that helps with the conservation district. Just like we encourage adequate and generous landscaping. We will not require landscaping and parking lot trees for trailer spaces or areas where it is not safe or intelligent to plant such trees, as we know what will happen to them there. So they do need to get offset and put elsewhere on site. Likewise, we do have strong buffering requirements. And this would be a site that generally would require what we would call the Class C buffer that we were talking about before with the berm and whatnot. But I should note that all the abutting uses are industrial. So it would seem kind of counterintuitive to put that in. The Class C berms were, and the Class C buffers with the berms were designed to really hide the use from street and whatnot. The frontage of this site along the new Sauerkraut Lane extension is proposing a lot of ornamental flowering trees, which is a good benefit. So I don't see that being an improvement there. One thing that the Planning Commission may want to discuss with the applicant is with all that landscaping and greenery, where else that could go or get utilized elsewhere, because the ordinance does call for a certain number of plantings per parking spaces. But beyond that, this is fairly simple. There is a lot of geotech going on out at the site. This is a quarry that's getting filled in, that's going to have a structure on top of it. I will defer to the township engineer to discuss that. But as far as we're concerned, we're very familiar with these types of developments, as you can tell, and as we are very well aware of right across the street on Spring Creek Road. So this will be the last one, and we'll work with them to talk about some of the technical items. I should note that we don't have a technical engineering review for this plan this month due to the volume of submissions. We do expect that next month, but we wanted to bring up planning topics, allow for the Planning Commission to offer initial feedback and give the opportunity for the applicants to present to the Planning Commission for the first time before technical review comes in.
Thank you. Yeah, I would just like to say, reiterate, we did not do a formal review. We will have a letter for you for the April Planning Commission meeting. As Nate had mentioned, this is originally a quarry site. You guys are currently working out there to do static compaction. It's my understanding that you're also going to do dynamic compaction. Is that true?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I can speak a little bit to that. So as you know, or as it's been mentioned, this was a site of a former quarry that's been filled in a uncontrolled manner, meaning push dirt in. They didn't do it in lifts and compact it as they go. So we did some initial geotech testing to find out kind of what it's made out of, and it's got layers of fines as well as granular soils. And there's two different methods we're implying. One is, as Brian mentioned, a static preload, where essentially you pile up dirt to use as a weight to slowly compress and that helps consolidate the finer grain soils. And then once that's done, as measured by monitoring, right? I believe they're setting plates either potentially tomorrow, but it'll be this week, hopefully. It's at the subgrade level. So then you set monitoring plates, survey those, and then monitor them as the preload pile is being constructed. And then once it's constructed, it'll sit dormant. We're hoping for 3 months, but it'll really be determined by the monitoring of those settlement plates. Once it's determined within, specification that it's done settling sufficiently, the overburden will be stripped off. And then at the sub-base level for the proposed development, dynamic compaction will take place to help consolidate those coarser grain soils. And then once that's complete, we'll do some confirmation borings and testing to make sure we got the results we need to not get differential settling for the building itself, so you don't end up with cracking or structural issues.
Could you just state your name for the record? so
Sure.
We can get you into the minutes.
Sean Policelli with Gilmore Associates.
Thank you.
Thank you. That actually answered a handful of my questions about, I was actually curious about schedule and
Sure.
timing as far as that dynamic compaction.
Yeah,
The static compaction.
yeah, with the weather, it's, obviously weather dependent, but per my latest communications with the site contractor, they hope to be setting the plates this week. And that's going hand in hand with our survey department, because as they set them, they need to survey them. And then it'll be a very frequent reshooting of them as they're filling around them. But then once the pile is there, it's pretty much once a week going out and checking them, and the site will kind of be dormant for a few months as we proceed through the land development process.
Go ahead, Maury.
Okay, I believe that quarry was filled with a lot of the mine wash from the building of Hamilton Crossing. Is that correct?
I don't know personally what it was, only that from the areas that we took testing of and did, deeper borings to figure out what the fills were made out of, but we didn't find anything other than sand soils, or sorry, sand clays. And, but, we submitted the geotech report and that would have more of those details. I'm not as familiar with the minutia of that.
So yeah, my biggest concern would be having your building safe. And so, yeah, just what the geotechnical stuff actually comes up with would be interesting. That at Hamilton Crossing, where they had the mine wash stuff, that they had to haul a lot of it out, and still Costco had to put in micro piles and so forth to have it be stable enough. So, just want to make sure health, safety, and welfare. So
Yeah, no, that was a significant concern, and, the major issue to evaluating the site for its feasibility for development. And then that initial round of geotechnical investigation to kind of determine, what are the options and kind of what's to.
And do you know about where on the plan the quarry hole itself was?
Yeah, I was going to say, if you switch to the existing features plan, Nate, I think you can see that through the existing contours, I believe, show it up on the second page. Nope, sorry. Oh, never mind. It's on the preloading plans that aren't part of this set, but were part of the permitting that was part of getting the quarry filled. But it's roughly on the lower middle section. Yeah, sorry, the contours don't show up on this plan set.
Okay, so it would be mainly under the parking lot, not under the building?
It's portion under the building, but then a significant portion under the parking lots of the lower portion of the page.
Okay.
Yeah, on the western half.
Well, to finish, I just want to say that we are going to be looking very closely at your geotechnical reports moving forward. There's obviously a lot of work to be done before those reports are finalized, and they have shown that the site is structurally stable. Months worth of work before we get those reports. So.
Thank you. Brian.
And then the other item that I wanted to discuss, or just to bring up, is that Nate had mentioned the work along Sauerkraut Lane. We expect that to take quite a good amount of time to finish. And same thing, speaking to your schedule, was just kind of curious. Obviously, you guys have been coordinating with our contractor and with us through that process, have access to your site. Just curious of your long-term schedule for construction.
Yeah, I believe the hope is to be done with construction by the end of next year. So be fully operational by then, but
by the end of 2023.
Yeah. Earlier if possible, but again, too, we know, the road was originally scheduled, at least that portion of it, by the end of last year, but delays are part of construction.
Who will do the geotech? study?
Oh, your applicant's engineer.
Yeah.
Who is
Uh,
your
Our
geotech?
office, yeah.
Who?
Our office will do the
Gilmore.
Do
geotechnical.
we have an independent review, geotechnical review?
An independent geotechnical review for the site.
Who from your office is going to do
Oh,
their
we'll-
review?
We'll do a review of their reports.
Yeah.
We have on staff people
Yeah.
qualified to do that.
To do the review of the reports, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, any of the reports that we prepare will be submitted as part of the land development. We actually submitted the testing we've done preliminarily. And then, like I said, after the plan is to do some confirmation testing after we're complete, just to make sure that we got the results we were intending to.
Just
Understood. Neither do we.
Go ahead.
Simply just for, make sure that I'm understanding correctly. I mean, when we talk quarries, there's huge variations in sizes, and what you see on TV isn't always what you see here in Lower Mcconju Town. Am I correct? It's about a 10-foot deep quarry? Am I reading the elevations incorrectly on the pre-existing?
Yeah, sorry, no, that doesn't show the previous quarry hole. I think
That's
from,
what's filled
from
in.
our testing, the fill ranged from 10 feet to 60 feet deep under where the building would be.
So what we're seeing on this elevation here is strictly what's already been filled in, the part that you'll
Yeah.
be testing, and then you still have another 10 feet or so.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because there were active operations, I think I have a note, something to the effect of, this is basically a snapshot of what the existing features are, because it was a quarry that was actually being filled, and it really hasn't been dormant. It's not a virgin site, so we had to go out and survey to start with some baseline as existing features. So whatever the date was of that survey, that's what the ground topo looked like. You go out there today, it looks different.
Sure. I just want to kind of
Yep.
get a scale of
Yeah, it
what
was
size this quarry was.
4 to 6 acres.
Yeah, big area. I was just trying to get the depth too, but
Yeah,
It's-
yeah, I believe, like I said, it's in the geotechnical report from the borings, but I want to say from memory that the fill under from the borings under the building range from 10 to 60 feet.
And I think Sauerkraut Lane, it's under construction.
Yep.
You understand that you can't really open the facility until Sauerkraut Lane is constructed, right?
Yes,
And that probably will be a condition of any approvals, that no occupancy until Sauerkraut is open and constructed.
Well, there's not even any frontage upon a street right now to ask for a building permit, let alone gain occupancy to anything. You need frontage upon a street to begin the process for almost anything. So our expectation is that section of Sauerkraut will be finished in a reasonable amount of time to meet, but we can't control a lot of the scheduling of what's going on right now. And we're trying to facilitate the plan as it comes in. So
But the property owner understands that, right?
yes.
That they can't open the facility until Sauerkraut Lane
Yeah,
is
like,
finished.
like I said, with the, nothing's guaranteed in life, but per the current schedule, we're hopeful that it tracks that. Even if it's not fully open, there'll be a portion that's usable and accessible for this facility before we're ready for it.
well, and we're probably looking at a situation also where, again, we need frontage upon a street. So hopefully that section of Sauerkraut Lane is complete to be able to get a building permit. It's something that the township holds to pretty strongly. We don't offer building permits for homes and subdivisions where people are starting to build houses, but the street's not done yet. So it goes that way for commercial and industrial uses too. And that's just to make sure that we're holding the line across the board for the township. So, but we do know that work, if you drive out there, is working on a regular basis. So.
I think what you heard tonight is geotech issues are really important. There's concerns about the quarry
Understood?
and
Yes.
Sauerkraut needs to be constructed before you can open your facility. We're clearly not ready to take action tonight
No.
on your plan. I think
No,
you
really just,
recognize that as well.
Just an introduction to say, see if there's any concerns other than those which we assumed. And, wait for the engineer's review letter and then revise plan, or we could come back and discuss if there's any waivers needed or, specific items. One thing I'll just point out, the stormwater where it says potential rain garden, That's kind of in flux because it was a quarry. It's a little bit unique. So we have an initial meeting. I had some informal discussions with the Conservation District to kind of see how they're going to gauge it. And then I spoke with Brian's office and just said, hey, when they get to that part of the technical review, kind of have that discussion. And I have a NPDS pre-application meeting later this month with the Conservation District. So that's why, because it's not your typical virgin piece of land that you're coming in, where that stuff would be more straightforward, how exactly that gets handled is why those are placeholders.
And that area would be a good spot to throw some of the plantings that would have otherwise been required over in buffers and other areas to augment the rain garden, which we support anyway. Been done in a couple of other spots with shrubs and trees along the edge. So that's an opportunity right there.
All right, why don't we open it up to public comment? In the audience, comments or questions? We'll also open it up to anyone participating remotely. If you have a question or comment, type it in using the chat feature.
Nothing coming in yet.
All right, well, this is a preliminary plan application, so we should table action tonight. There's a motion to table. Is there a second? Second by Wes. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The motion to table passes. Thanks.
Thank you.
That wraps up the regular agenda items. Nate, anything in terms of a department report?
I only have one item, just so the planning commission is aware. We were authorized by the Board of Commissioners at their last meeting to Board of Commissioners authorized the township manager to send staff to this month's zoning hearing board meeting. We're not exactly sure who it'll be yet, but the presumption is it'll be township solicitor, engineer, maybe myself. This is with respect to a property on Wild Cherry, right next to the townhomes, but before you get to the bridge. It's a diamond-shaped property right next to our new trail. I don't have the exact address for you, but essentially a party bought that and they've been trying to figure out a way to develop it for some time. The lot's incredibly encumbered with a lot of floodplain as well as utility easements. At one point, they were looking at single-family homes, but they were proposing single-family homes within the 500-year floodplain, which isn't allowed under our ordinances. So they have come back and they applied to the zoning hearing board for validity challenge of our cluster overlay, as well as it's basically a kitchen sink request for zoning relief in terms of other matters to basically put in a very long cul-de-sac of, I believe, 40 or 44 townhome units. We feel that one, given the purpose of the cluster overlay, which our presumption historically is that it was put in place to take townhomes out of nonconformity. So you could build a deck and put in a shed without having to go to the zoning hearing board. But also due to the location and the intensity of use as proposed on the site, there's no hardship. It's really just kind of trying to maximize development on a site that's that had floodplain and had easements, and that would have been part of your pro forma and research prior to buying it. So the board authorized to send us along to oppose the relief. But normally, as you know, we like to at least bring it to the planning commission's attention. Our workshop schedule and board schedule didn't allow for that to happen this month just because of how March falls. So just want to make sure that that's occurring. The planning commission's aware of it. It is a concern that staff had that we brought up. So that's it. Beyond that, we'll let everybody know what our April meeting agenda
When is
looks
that?
like.
When is that?
The zoning hearing board meeting will be on the 22nd of March here. So it's Tuesday night. Yep. Fourth Tuesday.
We were told to bring our old.
Yes. If you have your old iPads, we have a mail bin over there. If you could please put them in and then I will take them back. If you do not have your old iPads, please at your convenience, stop by and drop them off to either myself or Renee. We would greatly appreciate it. Your new instructions for your new iPads lay everything out for you there. And I'm sure everybody's very familiar on how to use those. So.
Okay, just so we're clear on our upcoming meeting schedule, no workshop meeting next week, right?
No workshop meeting next week.
And our next meeting is April 12th. Our next regular meeting is April 12th.
Correct.
And it looks like no workshop in April either. That would be April 19th.
Yeah, I can't imagine a situation April 19th. I won't be around, so.
You're not going to be around April 19th.
There we go.
I'm not gonna be around April
Things
19th.
got simple. No meeting.
So, yeah, so we'll let everybody know what our agenda looks like, though. Obviously, we'll have some technical reviews from some of the tabled items coming before, and we'll see who comes in with the submission. I have not heard anything for the first time in a long time about someone coming in, so we might have a light agenda.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Any other business items to come before the planning commission?
Can I just throw two things out there simply just for discussion for future? One, is it possible to include in the cloud drive, when we have old business, to make it easier to access? And maybe it's just me not knowing how to access some of the older items.
So Wes, that you bring up a very good point. That's something we've talked about internally on a couple of occasions. The reason why is because the cloud drive that we're utilizing, we have to be mindful about how much we put on there.
Okay.
So I have specifically been told we can't be using that as backup storage for older applications.
Okay.
Basically on a month-over-month basis, I need to remove the old applications, put the new ones in. Multiple departments are utilizing it. There is limited space, and we can't just basically put month over month back there just because of the massive amount of data that each packet includes. So I do switch it out on month by month. If you'd like access to something else, though, we can certainly get it for you.
No, I mean, usually by the time it's at that point, I mean, the major stuff has been flushed out, but I just asked if it was possible, and I understand why now. And then the other one is, and this is something that I've seen at other municipalities, at most of the meetings that I've attended. So we read quite lengthy motions, which I think is unique. Again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just the meetings that I've been that we do that. And most of them are either a strong summary, or they simply reference the document. The document could be made available to the public. Obviously, the applicant already has proposed. We rarely make changes, and if we did, we would obviously cite those. Is it possible to change the way that we do that? I mean, citing a document, and it's not in opposition to releasing the information to the public in any way. It's just that I don't even think that it's that beneficial when we're citing things like section 22A-501. I mean, no one really knows what that's really referring to. And having the actual document would be a better source for the public if they were concerned about those specific things. So we would then simply just say document ABC as a motion to make an approval. And I think, Amy, you would be happier today. I'd be happier than a few times that I've done it.
Yeah, I mean,
John, you feel
I'll
the
work
same
with
way
the
you feel
township
most of them?
solicitor's office for that and see if there's a way that we can abbreviate our motions. I do recognize that it's sometimes lengthy, especially when it gets to conditional uses sometimes, as I'm sure everybody can remember. I'll chat with the solicitor's office to see if there's a way for us to abbreviate it or
Because
not.
it's not an opposition to releasing the information. That should be, it's already being released. I mean, we could make it available as a
Well,
document there.
Okay, it's not being released to everybody. It's being released to the planning commission members and the solicitor and attorney for the applicant. So all of the rest of the people have not seen it until it is read. It would be good to have it included in the packet so that everybody could read it.
Yeah, there's really no reason. Nothing that we're doing is
Uh,
novel. I mean, we're,
The only thing is, I don't know when the list of conditions is actually drawn up. Is it at the Tuesday morning meeting? Or?
5 o'clock this afternoon.
So, I mean, so that, yeah, I would like to read through the things before they're voted on, because it is hard to hear sometimes all of the punctuation and stuff that really makes a difference in what it's actually saying.
yeah. And if someone was sitting in the audience, unless if they truly know the code book, which there's only a few, yourself and usually the applicant, I mean, that's about the extent. So I'm just offering it as a way to streamline it and not impede the distribution of public
But-
information, which is really important.
But overall, having coming up with those conditions and having them out there as long as in advance as possible is a great idea, because the conditions that you send to the commissioners is the basis for the resolution that the solicitor draws up.
Yeah.
And so 90% of the conditions in the resolution are the ones that came from the planning commission. And there are a few times when those resolutions do get modified. One example is Kate Durso's apartments next to Drees, where they came in with the different entrance driveway, and so then had to make modifications to be able to say, well, this is the plan that's actually getting submitted, and so need some flexibility on some of the engineering comments and stuff like that.
I put it out there as something that I've observed that I feel it, and a lot of other municipalities don't do it in this way. So that's why I say it.
No, I agree. And Nate, how many times have I bugged the solicitor about getting the resolutions to us for early so I can see all of the conditions?
To be fair, I've thought the same thing. I just thought it was historically. this is
Yeah,
the
no,
way
it is
never said
just
it.
like all things. It's the way we do it, but I know that other places do it differently, and if we can be more efficient and still
course, they
provide
used-
the same good service.
They used to pass out just one copy.
Yes, yes, we'll share, right?
Wes, did I understand that you also want some kind of way to say what particular?
No. I mean, I think we summarize, generally speaking, we summarize what we're voting on based on our discussion. I was merely referencing that those very specific items are something that even ourselves don't know. We know that they were pulled by the solicitor and why they're in there, but the general public doesn't know. So I don't feel that those specific things, even though they need to be in the motion, that when we're reading them aloud, we're not benefiting anyone, is what I'm trying to say. Do you disagree?
No,
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 yeah.
one of my concerns always been the average person who really is a citizen who we're supposed to represent. They're really interested in looking and they see a citation of a particular section of the zoning.
Yeah.
Ordinance or their ordinance. They have no idea
Correct.
what it is. That, therefore, they're not informed properly. My question would be, where do they eventually get informed? If not at the planning.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to that. Mine was on the higher level of the streamlining and efficiency. But we can talk about that further. I just wanted to propose it as an idea for future, once we get to maybe a workshop, dig into that a little bit. But want to let it rattle around for a while. But I'll make a motion to adjourn. I can do that
Okay.
one.
Does anyone else have anything else they want to add before we adjourn? All right, so we have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
A second.
Second? Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The meeting is adjourned at 9:29. Good night.